Hello, loves. Your girl Carrie here. Today, I want to talk about symptoms of narcissistic abuse and different ways that it can and will affect your health. Things that maybe you should look out for, and things that you should possibly talk to your medical provider to see if this is something that maybe you should be concerned about. Now, before I begin, I just want to advise that this is not to be used for medical purposes and for informational purposes only. I do not diagnose, and if you are feeling that you are part of narcissistic abuse or um, maybe any of this may apply to you, I always advise to seek a medical professional in your area. There are many different types of symptoms from narcissistic trauma, or also known as narcissistic abuse syndrome. Narcissistic abuse syndrome, or you may just hear me say NAS, we tend to abbreviate a lot with medical terminology because so many is just extravagantly long, but it does um, cause deep psychological and physical distress on your body. Your mind is connected to your immunity system and your nervous system. So, as I've explained in many of my videos, your mind is the steering wheel to your body. So, what you think, what you eat, that all affects the way that your immune system reacts and also your nervous system reacts. Now, let's begin with the brain. Our brain not only functions off of patterns that we've learned based on traditions and beliefs and so forth, it also runs on chemicals. Certain chemicals trigger certain parts of our brain, and that is how our brain knows to react to different situations. When you are in narcissistic abuse, you are in what is called fight and flight. They go from love bombing to abuse. They go from being a kind person to being the most hateful person you've ever met in your life. When you are in that high and that low, or that fight and that flight, you are releasing different chemicals. And so when you are in the flight mode, when you are in the active abuse mode, your brain is releasing adrenaline and it's releasing cortisol, because those are the chemicals that tell your brain that you need to be on alert, that you need to make sure that you are safe and you need to react and protect yourself. When you are in the love bombing stage and things are going well, and let's say even if you're in the intimacy with them, then your body is releasing serotonin and it is releasing dopamine. And these are the chemicals that tell your brain to feel good. They're basically the feel good chemicals. As a survivor myself, and anyone that is a survivor, they could basically tell you as time goes on and the mask starts to fall, the times that the serotonin and the dopamine and the feel good moments start to become fewer and far between. Now that they have shown you who they are and have performed the abuse, you tend to have more of the abusive days than you do the love days. With this in time, especially when you're walking on eggshells, you're making sure you don't do this because they'll get upset, or you're finding yourself lying about things and you were never a liar to begin with just because you want to keep the peace. So in time, your body sticks and stays in that chronic stress mode. It doesn't really ever click over back to the dopamine and feel good, because you don't really ever feel good anymore because you are abused every day. Now, when you are in this chronic stress and you have that cortisol and adrenaline that is pumping out of you all the time, there are two responders in your brain that tell yourself to react in those situations. The first responder is what's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is basically what tells your brain, panic, alert, we're in rage. It tells your, mind basically to take cover, you're in danger. It releases the stress hormone, and it also speeds up your heart rate, which obviously in turn affects your nervous system and your immunity system. Because when someone is upset, like for instance, if you are, maybe you lost a loved one, notice how you can't eat anything, you're just so, distraught and so forth. That's because your mind is in the grief stage. Same thing with when your mind is in danger, it's affecting your immunity system and your nervous system. When you are also in chronic stress, That cortisol, because it's an inflammatory, it never allows the amygdala to close so that the second responder can kick in, which is your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is the one that makes the logical thinking. It's the one that makes the problem solving. It's basically the one that, like, if you're ever in an heightened situation and then a couple days later you're like, maybe I shouldn't have said that or did that. That is your prefrontal cortex making those decisions in your mind. Now, this is why it is very imperative with anyone in mental health when they ask, are you going to hurt yourself or hurt someone else? The reason they ask this is because then they know that that amygdala is stuck open if someone is like, yes, I am, I need help or whatever. Being in that situation, that shows chronic stress. So healthcare providers want to administer medication so that it'll help close that amygdala, and you can then make the logical decisions and the logical thought processes so that that way the second responder kicks in the prefrontal cortex to do those things. This is why I highly suggest any individual that is a survivor of narcissistic abuse to have blood work done to seek for autoimmune disorders or deficiencies, as well as CID, which is chronic inflammatory disease. These are very common when someone has been in chronic stress for such a long period of time, because that cortisol and that adrenaline that's going through your body is inflaming different parts of your body. And of course, the organs then react to that. Your mind and body work and react off of consistency. So when you do something consistent, your body then adjusts itself to react and to make that normalcy for who you are. So if you are always in survival mode or in a stress or trauma type environment, your body gets used to that. And so when you are not in stress and you are in peaceful environments, like outside of, escaping the narcissistic abuse, and now you are on your own, that is when a lot of people will start seeing health issues, because now you are put into a different situation and your body is like kind of going haywire, trying to adjust itself to what the new normalcy is going to be and what now the new consistency is. And so this is now when all the inflammatory things start coming out, and people are having lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and just all around, like I said, so many different autoimmune diseases. I mean, even the C word, happens because your body is regulating to a whole new level of hormones and, just overall levels of every type of chemical that goes through your body. I wrote down a lot of the most common symptoms and health issues that come from narcissistic abuse. But of course, like the most common for any type of trauma is your typical anxiety and depression. You may be more anxious because of always being in that flight mode. Depression, because you are coming out of an abuse where your identity was basically stolen in a sense. Like you lost your personal identity because you have always catered to the narcissist and what they want and their ways and so forth, that you basically lost yourself. So a lot of people go through depression because the mind wants to seek comfort in what it knows, even if it's bad and it's hostile in a toxic situation. It wants to go to that because that's what it knows as safety. That's what it knows as regulatory ways to function. So now you may fall into a depressive state because you're feeling loneliness. You're feeling a sense of your own identity and you don't really know who that is because you've been catering to someone else for so long. Insomnia is very common. Restless nights, having nightmares is very common. A lot of people think they get TMJ, but really it's tightening from the jaw because your stress is obviously making you chew down on your teeth, and that is causing pain in your jawline. A lot of people have emotional flashbacks. They're very hypervigilant. They have chronic self-doubt. They constantly are doubting themselves because they haven't made decisions for themselves in so long. And so now when you are having to make decisions on your own, you are like hemming and hawing and not really knowing because you've never been one who's been able to make your own decisions. Many do self-isolation. This is because their trust was stolen from them. This person made you feel like you were on top of the world and that they were on top of the world with you. So your vulnerability was given to this person and they jeopardized it all. And many of them, so that they could do the smear campaign and so that they can discard you, they will even use the vulnerability that you told them, whether it was past trauma or secrets that you never really let anyone know, but you've clearly trusted this person, and they will use those against you and smear you with that information all over the place. Loss of memory is very common. Feeling worthlessness, feeling small, those are very common. And that is because you've had someone else making decisions for you and basically running your life for so long. Now you don't really know what to do. You almost feel like a lost soul. And the memory loss is because of all the gaslighting and from being judged for the things that you actually do enjoy. Unexplained headaches is another very common one, tight shoulders, and even pain in the hips or the lower back. We carry our tension on our shoulders and in our hips. So, those are very common areas that become hurtful. On the nervous side of things, you will have racing hearts. You will be triggered by things that remind you emotionally of what they did to you or certain situations and things that you had gone through with them that they either made catastrophic or traumatic and so forth. Your digestive system usually is very out of whack. Many individuals have digestive issues, whether it's irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, and so forth, because again, those feelings made your digestive system messed up. So those are things that, again, are very common symptoms from this abuse. So if you are a survivor of narcissistic abuse and you are encountering any of these type of things that I had mentioned, I highly suggest that you go seek a medical professional to rule out different things, because you could be feeling symptoms from the abuse that you had encountered. Again, this is not to be used as medical advice or diagnosis or anything in that nature. This is for informational purposes in hopes that it gives alertness and awareness to individuals who are survivors, or even in these situations, to take care of your health, because your health is most important and it's the biggest asset that you have. If you've ever heard the slogan, stress will kill you, this is a very good example of how and why. Make sure that you protect your health and protect your peace, because they are more important to you than you may actually know. Thank you for joining me today, and never forget how loved you are.